right, guys, welcome back. We're going to be going through another interview segment here, this time with Jesse Baltes. And he's also been a stand-up comic, so it's totally random. We have two stand-up comics on here today, and actually, I remember hearing that you guys performed together in DC for a while, like a decade ago, which is it's just amazing how things cross like that. Um, yeah. Anyway, Jesse founded the Madhatter Showcase in DC. Worked on the Bargain Basement show in Chicago, and today's topic is about finding meaning in mortality. And his father was recently diagnosed with ALS, and he's been launching this initiative called ALS Car Go. To help raise awareness. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. He's also been an integral part of the Global Hope Summit team. So he's the guy that made most of the memes for us. And, or as he says, if you like him, he did them. If you don't, it was my fault. So
yeah, I'll blame Tim on those then.
But awesome, man. So yeah, just first of all, just tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about this project you're working on.
Yeah, my name's Jesse. I am in the eastern U.S. right now. I am at the very, very, very beginning of this initiative, as you said. In fact, I'm coming live at you from inside a van, which is going to be my home for the foreseeable future. I mean, at least the next 4 or 5 months, I think. Yeah, as you said, my dad was recently diagnosed with ALS, which is, of course, a degenerative neurological disease, which essentially means that he will only get worse from here. He's having a little muscle loss in his right hand right now, his right arm. But yeah, this project has kind of got multiple prongs. Stage one is that I'm going to be building this van out with my dad, which is why I'm currently headed to Minnesota, where he and my mom live. So right now this van it's a mattress and it's my bike and a few boxes and that's about it. So we're gonna build this whole thing out together, the two of us. We'll put in a bed, we'll put in a kitchenette with a fridge and sink and all that, and maybe a toilet. I don't know. Stay tuned. We'll see.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what is it that inspired you to go this route, to decide to do the van?
It was kind of the culmination of several different conversations with different friends about what's going on in the world today, COVID in the U.S., what options are still available to us, and a couple of good friends of mine were encouraging me to do this, right? Just get in a van and go. And it kind of dovetailed with my dad's situation in that, this is also a new diagnosis, and it seemed like a nice way to sort of spend time with him, work on a project with him, but also to, get out on my own a little bit, do some sort of introspection, and hopefully raise a little awareness along the way about ALS, about the research that's being done, about the treatments that are available, which frankly are extremely limited. And yeah, just kind of mush all that into one. And I think probably the big, I'll be keeping track of it on social media, Instagram and all that. But I think the big sort of product of it is going to be a podcast that'll likely just be one season, but kind of discussing with him what his experience is with this situation, with ALS, with knowing that there really is not a cure, there are only a few treatments, and kind of what it is to know that a parent is going to die and how you process that, and I'd like to speak to some other people as well, about friends of mine, about their relationships with their mostly fathers, but parents, and kind of what those look like and what are the complications. And I know a few folks who have either lost parents or have had close calls, and it's definitely not a new subject by any stretch, but I do think that we generally try to avoid thinking about this kind of thing as long as humanly possible, you know. So unless a loved one is dying or has died, I feel like it's not really in our nature to go down that mental rabbit hole of what is that experience going to be, how do you prepare, how do you know get to the other side of it, essentially.
Yeah, I think currently in this time, I think there's a lot of people experiencing or admitting their own mortality. Just with,
Mm-hmm.
with the virus. I think that's something big that people are going through right now. Um, but I'm curious, how did you feel like when you first heard about your dad's ALS, and like how have you went about coming to grips with it for yourself?
um I mean, the way I found out was so unremarkable. I was staying with some good friends in Boston, where I was writing out a lot of this sort of uh, COVID situation, and um, it was just a text message from my mom to all the siblings. Just, I don't want to say nonchalantly, but kind of fucking nonchalantly, like, Dad was diagnosed with ALS, and I was like,
It's like,
is
what?
this a typo? Like, this is this is how you're gonna tell us? Um, and the friends who I was staying with, one of them is a doctor, and I have, like, a vague passing awareness of ALS, of Lou Gehrig's disease, and I know it's not good, but the first thing I did was kind of like shell shocked. I asked him, like, what does this mean? What does this diagnosis mean? How bad is it? What's the prognosis? And of course, he obviously doesn't know my dad's particular situation, but the prognosis is not good.
Mhm.
It is going to get worse, and there's potentially ways to slow the progression, but there's no stopping it. There's no reversing it. So
Yeah.
it it's sort of set in kind of slowly that, like, oh, okay, this is like a very tangible way that this could go. And I mean, as far as processing it, I haven't. I've I've made a very conscious choice to not deal with this yet. I figure, like, buy a van, drive across the country first, and then you know maybe actually try to comprehend what this means, and what the experience is going to be for him and for our family and for me personally, to sort of just move forward as best we can.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We've had a few people today talking about sort of this intersection of kind of what life throws at us, what our own sort of genius and skills and everything else is, and kind of how that can all come together in unique ways. And I definitely think this is a unique way, which is great. And I think that's so important that we lean into those moments. Um, but I guess, how is your relationship to your dad, not necessarily as a father, but just as another human being? Like, how has your thinking about him shifted since just realizing that he is going to die?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I think, I mean, I only kind of came to grips with my dad and my mom being, like, fully developed human beings prior to my birth, like, a decade ago. Like, that's when I was like, oh, you were a person. You, like, had a life and interests other than just feeding me and cleaning up my poop or whatever.
Right.
Um, so that's already, like, kind of that was already. And I honestly don't know. I think a lot of people kind of have that aha moment that, like, oh, my parents are people, but also maybe everyone knows that, and I was just behind the curve. I'm not sure, but um, yeah, I mean, as far as my relationship with my dad, just as a person, I mean, of course, it's difficult to disconnect the paternal dynamic, but
Fair enough.
um, it's good. It's good. I have some friends who had, um, complicated relationships with their parents, or just bad relationships with their parents. And my relationship with my folks in my both my mom and my dad is great. They've always been super supportive of me. They've always, I know, wanted the best for me, even when those paths were not necessarily the most orthodox or expected ways to go. And yeah, I mean, he's always there for me. We don't talk a ton. Like, the dynamic in my family, which I think is not uncommon, is kind of that I talk to my mom and she's sort of the conduit. And if there's something I need to talk directly with my dad about, like I was working on this motorcycle during COVID, and I'd call him directly about how do I paint on chrome, or how do I wire this this headlamp, because he was an electrician in the Navy many lifetimes ago. So yeah, there it is kind of like I don't know, sort of a Spartan communication. Like, we talk when there's something to talk about.
Yeah.
Whereas my mom she just wants to talk. She, no agenda, no path, no objective, just let's talk.
Right.
So yeah, but it's the relationship is good, but there is that, like, one thought that I've been having over and over again is like that I need to cram more relationship into the time that we have left. Like, I need to ask the big questions and hear the his like lifelong lessons, but I also feel like that instinct is very much based on TVs and film, where there's going to be some dramatic, he's in a hospital bed and he whispers to me like the secret of life or whatever, and of course I know intellectually that's not real, that's not how it's going to go. But there is that knee jerk, like, I need to think of all the questions before it's too late, kind of like a sort of a FOMO aspect to it all.
Do you think that's the result of like regret of not having done that enough in the past, or do you think that's just kind of like, oh, I only have so much time left?
I think it's probably a little of both. I don't. It's not as though like we're estranged or anything like that, but like I was saying, I mostly talk to my mom when I'm keeping in touch with my parents, and so there is a little of that, like, maybe I should have been asking these questions earlier, kind of piece of it, but yeah, I think it's mostly I think it's mostly just seeing the writing on the wall a little bit and knowing that there is finite time. And I think that's the bigger catalyst for like what do I want to know, before.
Cool. Yeah, I had a very good a mentor of mine recently was actually speaking later on the summit, but he kind of asked me, he's like, told me one time that I hadn't come to grips with my own mortality, right, and what that meant for my life. So I'm curious, like, is there anything that's being brought up here where you're kind of seeing your own mortality more in this relationship or in this situation?
Yeah. Yeah, I think yes. I think like it's kind of early in the process of accepting all this and learning about all this and understanding it. So I think that piece is probably going to continue to hit harder over the coming like weeks and months.
Right.
But there definitely is a sense of your own mortality. Like, I think about, I know my dad's parents did not live very long. He is, oh God, this is terrible, 87, just turned 87. Man, I hope that's right. But his folks both passed away much younger, in their 50s. And so I've had conversations with him before where he's sort of indicated that he kind of feels like he already beat the odds. Like he's had health issues his whole life, or at least my whole life. He's dealt with arthritis and he's dealt with diabetes, and so there have always been different issues. So he have been times where it seems like he feels, and I've never asked him this directly, but that he sort of beat the odds. He's like a little bit on borrowed time. Like he already did better than expected in terms of longevity.
Right.
And I do like it does kind of trickle down because there is that father son bond, and there is the fact that like my father and I happen to just look a lot alike. There are pictures of him when he was younger and of me when I was that age, and like we look like practically the same person. And so there is something about seeing someone who looks like me, who is gonna go through this experience, that I think does drive the mortality point home. But yeah, again, like I've really not allowed myself to totally unpack that piece yet.
Right. Yeah, we earlier today we saw a few different things related to kind of finding your own, whether that's your passion, your ambition, your like what you're trying to create in the world. Coming at that from a few different angles. And I realize that you're unpacking this for yourself, so I'm going to ask this a little more generally. How do you think understanding your own mortality relates to the your own pursuance of your mission or your purpose?
That's been a big shift, or a continuation of a big shift, which is absolutely that, reckoning with one's own mortality and therefore your limited time on this planet. Like absolutely it ramps up the motivation, because it's easy, especially when you're younger, to kind of, and I'm probably more guilty of this than most people, you're able to just sort of kind of drift from thing to thing and flit around, and like feel like you don't have to commit, you've got time to figure it out. And I've been feeling in the last several years that the clock is very much ticking on just for me personally, just like finding some path and some sense of sort of stability and consistency, just because after college I was doing stand-up for 15 years, and I had every odd job under the sun during that time, and I've continued to kind of just do things piecemeal, and my folks have been so supportive, and I know especially my mom would love to see me comfortable, like financially, like stable, and I think my dad doesn't say it, but I'm sure he feels that way as well. And there is maybe even a little more added urgency that, like, gosh, wouldn't it be nice to have my fucking shit together before my dad dies? Like, that would be nice. It would be nice if he didn't, shuffle off this mortal coil thinking, man, that kid really didn't do shit. Like, he had a lot of time and he did not do anything. So, I think definitely seeing his path laid out, and realizing I'm getting closer to the end than the beginning, does absolutely kind of light a fire.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Shift gears a little bit here, because I want to talk more about we'll talk a little less about the mortality and more about the relationship side, I think. I know you said a lot, like you've always kind of connected through your parents, through your mom, and I think that's probably a fairly common occurrence in a lot of places, although I'm sure it's not always the case. But I'm curious, what kind of impact do you feel like the relationship with your dad has made on your life, and how do you hope to deepen that relationship in the next however long is left.
Um, I mean, as far as impact, I think, it's easily one of the most important relationships in my life. And, he's one of the most important role models in my life. And that he grew up in like a very small town in northern Minnesota, like pretty parochial. And he, got out and kind of built a great life for himself. Not without its ups and downs, certainly, but, um, yeah, he, was a very smart guy. He got a great education. He was able to wear a ton of different hats in his professional career, and I think he did it all in a very, um, respectable way, I guess, like a value driven way, in that he, how he treats people and how he moves through the world are are ways that I respect and appreciate, and try to mimic in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I think, and of course from my mom too, but I think their values, um, yeah, really steer me. And I suppose that's probably true for most people, but maybe if you have, shitty parents, you end up trying to go the opposite direction. But,
Yeah.
yeah, but, and that's, but the flip side of that coin is that in a lot of ways he's kind of theoretical also. Like when we were growing up, he was around, he was home every night, but, he wasn't, I don't remember him being like super involved before a certain age. Like in my memory, there was a time when us kids learned how to make jokes, and I feel like that's when he was like, all right, I guess you're cool, I guess I can, like, hang out with you. But I feel like he was a little more removed before that. um, but yeah, as far as like where I would like the relationship to go, um, again, I don't know. I have this sort of corny idea that like all you know the boundaries and the limitations of the relationship kind of fade, and it's like, shit or get off the pot time, and we can maybe have, I don't know, some really real conversations about, death. And he has a complicated relationship with religion, and how that kind of plays into it. And, yeah, and kind of what other lessons does he have for me,
Yeah.
just like how to continue moving through this world after he's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. I think in so many cases there's, the legacy, the thing we want to, that even we want to leave behind, right? Is so important and so desired. And I think at the same time, through our own human connection, you want other people's legacies to happen too,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so that's really, yeah, that's really powerful. um yeah, so what, so right now you're on your way to Minnesota to do the van. um you have any like special, like, what's the thing you really want in the van besides the toilet?
Man, there's no besides, Tim. In my in my perfect world, I get they have incinerating toilets. They're
Yeah,
like $2,000, but it burns it all up. That's it.
just
It's
done.
done. So, that would be pretty nice. But other than that, I think I would just like a comfortable place to sit and write.
Yeah,
I'd like to really kind of get a lot of this on paper while I'm cruising around the country. And so, yeah, just a comfortable place to sit and write in
yeah,
this van would
nice.
be super sweet.
Yeah, and I know from you before, like, I mean, yeah, you traveled a lot doing stand up, but one of the things and one of the reasons you kind of left Minnesota in the first place, if I can be so bold, is that you wanted to explore, right? You wanted to see different cultures. Um, and so it's got to be interesting, having that exploration and then now going home. Um, what does that feel like, and how do you think that sort of relates to why you want to go on this trip and why you want to continue to explore?
Um, yeah, I will say going home feels a little bizarre in this situation. Um,
Mm,
First of all, I'm driving obviously because I have this van, but also because you know, but both my parents are older. My dad is now immunocompromised, and so it just didn't feel safe or reasonable to fly or get home on any kind of public transit.
right.
Um, but I will confess I do have sort of a dread of like getting stuck in Minnesota. And let me be clear, I grew up in the Twin Cities. I grew up outside of St. Paul. I loved my formative years. I loved growing up there, but for whatever reason, like settling back there really bums me out. Um, and I weirdly I just had my 20th high school reunion via Zoom a couple weeks ago, and everyone was doing great. Like everyone looked great. They had kids. They had careers, and a lot of them had settled down like within probably 15-20 mile radius of where we all went to high school. And and there's no judgment in that. Like if that's what you're looking for, I totally respect it. It's just not. It's not what I want. Um, and of my siblings, I have two sisters and a brother, and my sister Jenny, who lives in the Twin Cities still, and myself are the ones who are the most unfettered, right? Like
Mm,
we don't have, we don't have families, and we can be there. But I do get concerned that like I maybe go back for a longer period of time to help out, and then I don't make it back out, and that does kind of bum me out a little bit. And I do think that is part of the get on the road thing is like this is a great project and I'm really going to get to spend some good time with my dad, but there's also like there's an out where I get to go, like you said, explore. And I'm probably going to spend a month or two in the Southwest, which I've never done. And yeah, just kind of keep doing what I want to be doing with my life, and maybe that's a
yeah.
continuation of this greater urgency, seeing that there is an end to like, okay, let me get on the road now, let me do this thing now. And in a lot of ways honor my dad by having an experience that he maybe won't be able to have again.
Mm,
And that's both the traveling, but he can travel. I mean, he's not in terrible shape by any stretch, but
right.
also like I'd like to get a lot of running in and a lot of biking in and like just a lot of time in nature. And he loves that. My mom loves that. They go to northern Minnesota, the Boundary Waters, a bunch of times every summer. Um, but it feels like a way to honor him and honor the experience he's going to be having to kind of get out and soak it all up.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. How do you think hope plays into it? We've had a little bit of a darker conversation here, just kind of not even darker, that's the wrong word, just deeper. And I want to say, like, how does hope play a role, in your project and what you're doing, like with your dad? Where do you feel like where that's leading you?
um, I think that there's sort of an overlap between the the impetus to do more with less time and what we are calling hope, right?
Mm,
And by that I mean all these experiences that we're going to have are kind of positive outcomes from this frankly very shitty diagnosis. Like
right.
there's you know being diagnosed with a degenerative disease it's not fucking good, period. But if what's coming out of this is I do get to spend some really good time with my dad when he still is all there, and selfishly I do get to travel the country and hopefully doing this to kind of raise awareness and maybe some money for ALS is again kind of a way to honor my dad. And he's sort of a stoic German and doesn't really talk much about emotions, and me, I'm very enlightened, but with him there's not a lot of like, I love you your nice kind of conversations. Even though I know we both know that it's there, of course.
Right.
But yeah, I think so. I think that's the hope is that there are good things that are going to come from this knowledge, as opposed to if he just passed away suddenly, where there wouldn't be this time to process and there wouldn't be this time to do a project together and to like maybe have some good conversations. And so yeah, I think that's what I feel hopeful about, is that this can allow us to really um, you know say anything we want to say,
Yeah.
and experience what we want to before we don't get to.
Awesome. Yeah, really, really appreciate you coming on here and for bearing your soul, for what you're doing. And I think it's a really amazing project, and I definitely can see the great deepening of that connection with your dad coming from this, and I think that's such a great and powerful goal. So, yeah, just tell everybody where they can find out more, how they can follow you on your journey.
Yeah, there on the screen there's my website, jessebaltes.com, and on the website I have links to all my social media. I'm most active on Instagram, but yeah, I'm gonna kind of be sharing this via those platforms. There'll be an Instagram component, and there'll also be this links to this podcast that'll be conversations about this with my dad, with my friends, about their parents and their relationships. So yeah, jessebaltes.com is sort of the best way to launch from. Best place.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, thank you for coming on here again, and also just deeply appreciate all that you've done to support us getting Global Hope Summit out and onto the airwaves. So
yeah, my pleasure, man. Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to following you on this trip as well. So with that, we'll wrap this session here, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you, Tim.